Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Hannah Elliott, and this is Hot Pursuit.
All right, we have today an interview that touches my heart, actually.
Yeah, we're talking with Tim Pryde, who is the head of business for Dolby Atmos music and a great musician in his own right. I think he's being way too modest when he says he's sort of so-so. But
I definitely want to get his new record.
He refused to tell us. I just remembered.
Yeah.
He refused to tell us. I was sort of furiously Googling, trying to find it, and I couldn't find the name.
So, by the way, you've talked about this before because I think it was part of your Cadillac Escalade IQ experience. But
yes.
tell us again how you got involved with Dolby Atmos. Yeah.
Well, it's really interesting. I went up to San Francisco to drive the Escalade IQ, which is the electric version of the Escalade. And the drive was great, but we sort of had this forced march to Dolby HQ one evening. And I went in thinking, this is ridiculous. Why are we here? This is supposed to be a car launch. We don't need to go to some press junket at Dolby. And Jamie, the PR for Dolby, came up and was so friendly and just completely disarmed me and was like, come sit in the car. Let's sit in there was a Cadillac Optic, I think. So he was like, come on and join me and sit in the car and we can listen to Chaka Khan. And Tim Pryde, our guest today, was also in the car, and these two completely flipped my opinion about why I was there and really made me an evangelist for what Dolby is doing in Atmos and for car sound in general. And we just sat in this car for 30 minutes and listened to music and talked about their technology. It was awesome. And I really didn't know anything about Dolby before then. But that is how I first met Tim. And then, of course, when I wrote this piece on sort of automakers embracing sound in cars and it becomes really a status symbol in luxury cars, then, of course, I went back and interviewed Tim for that story, too. So it's been great knowing them. I've learned a ton.
Well, I obviously care a lot about music and cars as well. Let's get straight to it. Here's Tim Pryde. I think that I think that audio is one of the most important and least discussed areas of car lover sort of universe, right? I mean, in Road and Track, in Car and Driver, on any of the websites, in Pursuits even, when we're writing and reading about cars, when we're talking about cars, almost no one ever mentions the stereo. And listening to music in a car is one of the best things you can possibly... That's what a car is for after driving, right?
Yes.
It's the number one place people listen to music.
So what's the deal? How come no one ever... I guess, Tim, you're in a different kind of industry, so you probably talk about it all the time. But do you notice that when people review cars, nobody other than Savage Geese ever talks about the stereo system?
Yeah, the audio system has not been one that's discussed or talked about much. It's nowadays becoming something that is advertised, or at least there'll be a mention of it by a lot of car partners and auto manufacturers. But it is incredible given how many people I talk to who are music lovers saying, I discovered music riding in my car, when I was in high school, or talking to artists who are always saying, I always listen to my music in my car after a mix because that's where I trust the audio system. I mean, it is incredible that it isn't talked about more, but maybe it's because there hasn't been a lot to talk about in the last, couple decades.
Can we go back to the very beginning of this, Tim? Because I'm very interested in the history of Dolby and which started out as a sound canceling technology. That's correct, right? And this will come back to cars because sound canceling seems to be a building block to creating a great environment for listening to audio. Can you just sort of walk us through the development and the history of Dolby from where it started to where we are now with Atmos, and then explain what Atmos is? Because when I met you, I didn't know what Atmos meant. So we need some education here.
Sure. Dolby has an amazing story behind it. We actually are celebrating our 60 years this year. And Ray Dolby, the founder, uh, was a big believer in how technology can unleash a creative's abilities, how a creative, an artist, an engineer can do more with technology as it pertains to their craft. So where he started was really getting to understand in a music space what challenges musicians in the 60s were having when it came to recording audio. And what he noticed was as you would record let's say a three-piece jazz band, if you needed to add an additional track, like say a vocalist, there would be noise that would be introduced. And so what happened is you'd get this layering of noise on top of every track once you recorded it. So most recordings up until the 60s were done live in a studio with everybody having to nail their take. And the idea of multi-track recording, which was around, wasn't really adopted because of the noise problems. So what he introduced was noise reduction technology. And that paved the way for multi-track recording. That is one of the absolute critical points in audio history that changed the way that musicians and artists created music, which was, hey, we can actually layer more instruments, vocals on top of tracks. And that is how today everybody does it now. And so we got started in noise reduction technologies. And through the 60s and 70s, if you look at a lot of vinyl records or in the 80s cassette tapes, if you look on the packaging, you'll actually see recorded in Dolby or
Cars
Dolby
had that.
stereo, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of that was because of this technology and products that the company was building was integrated into the recording studios. The interesting thing about that is that Ray and team was not just thinking about the creatives as well. They were also thinking about the consumers, the people who would be hearing this stuff. And so they needed to create technologies for the playback environments. If we use the car as a great example, which a lot of people of maybe my generation or older remember, is you'd sit in your car and there would be on the stereo system a Dolby button or a Dolby NR noise reduction button. Well, that was the put it simply, the consumer side or the endpoint to get the most out of the Dolby technologies that were being made for creatives in the studio and for the consumer sitting in the car. And so Dolby has a legacy in working with creatives, understanding the challenges that they have, using technology and engineering to solve those challenges and problems, and then most importantly, ensuring that the creatives and the artists, all of the things that they come up with are being able to be heard, seen by the consumer. And so automotive for us has got, we're steeped in history there because we did so much of it. And so many people know us from the Dolby NR, Dolby button days of the 70s and 80s and 90s. So now you fast forward to today and you asked about Dolby Atmos. Dolby Atmos is the evolution of what Dolby started in the 70s, which was immersive audio. In the 70s, there was a little film, an indie film that came out. It was called Star Wars. And Ray Dolby and George Lucas got together, and George said, I really want to do something different when it comes to the storytelling element of sound. And so I'm doing that with the music, with John Williams scoring this amazing score for that movie. I'm doing it with the visuals that are going to be seen that's never been seen, but the audio experience must be something unique. And so they set out to create the first truly immersive audio experience in cinema, which was with the debut of the original Star Wars movie in '77, and that was Dolby Surround. So Dolby Surround has then evolved over decades to where the idea that you can place and put audio in different parts of a room, whether it be in a cinema or in a home, through headphones and now in cars, is one that we've been really at the very beginning of. Dolby Atmos is our latest, greatest immersive spatial technology that creatives can create in. So I'm a musician, I'm a sound designer on a dub stage at a Hollywood movie. I'm a podcaster trying to create some type of immersive audio experience for my listeners. I'm a game developer, whatever genre of content, Dolby Atmos is the engine, is the tools and the playback products that allow for this immersive experience. And automotive is really where we're very excited about because, to Matt's point, we do so much listening of music and audio, and now podcasts and audiobooks, and even AV is starting to come, audio video experiences where being immersed in a set cabin where you're not moving, you are sitting there, somewhat like a movie theater. It's a lot of fun for the creatives to know, hey, if I place an instrument here or there or behind somebody or in front of them, they're going to experience that in their car, and they might be experiencing it for a significant amount of time if they're taking a long drive somewhere down to San Diego, right, Matt?
Yes, from San Francisco down to San Diego. By the way, the first movie wasn't the first movie Clockwork Orange, the first Dolby movie?
Well, Star Wars was the one that really got it on the map as far as Dolby being the thing that really showed through as like, oh, this is Star Wars presented in Dolby. So yes, Clockwork Orange was working with Ray and how they developed the sound design. But Star Wars was the thing that when we look back in time and people look at like, when did the mass become aware of what Dolby was doing? It was Star Wars.
In terms of the bands, do you know who some of the first bands were that recorded with the technology?
So what Ray was working on initially was a lot of jazz and classical artists, because they were the ones that were starting to try to figure out, hey, instead of a live environment, can we do things where we're adding multi-track? That technology then got adopted by, say, like Capitol Records, and then Capitol Records started incorporating it into their studios. And so you'd have artists of all, like now they'd be classic rock, but you could have folks like Elton John or Led Zeppelin or folks like that who were leveraging the technology back then. And ironically, Elton John is one of the artists we worked with as we started to do stuff in Dolby Atmos. As a big fan of that.
He's eternal. I mean, he's timeless.
Yeah.
Not surprised.
So what I'm wondering, what I always wonder when I'm listening to music in Dolby, or I guess now in Atmos, is does it have to be recorded with that technology to sound perfect with that technology? Or, if I'm listening to an old record by the Pink Floyd or the Dead, can I use Dolby to enhance it even if it wasn't recorded with Dolby?
That's a great question. So Dolby Atmos is not something you necessarily record with. You still, all the same recording techniques and technologies, microphones, multi-channel, all of that still remains the same. Dolby Atmos for the creatives, in this case a mixing engineer, is something they use to mix in. So think of it as an environment that we're providing them that gives them the sense of space around them to place instruments anywhere they want in the room, whether they want them to be sitting static or they want them to be moving. This can be applied to any music, any multi-channel music. So you use the example of Pink Floyd. Last year, there was a release, 50th of that with Dolby Atmos. Incredible. I mean, it's an incredible record, but it's also an incredible mix to where they had all the original multi-track tapes. They then brought it into an Atmos work environment, which, just so you know, Atmos work environments are a part of almost every sound design environment today because we've integrated our tools into all the most common digital audio workstations. So the stuff that your team is probably using to mix you today, right now, most likely has Dolby Atmos tools already integrated into it.
I hope so.
So that makes it easier for creatives. That way they're not having to second guess. So then you take Pink Floyd, you've got a mixing engineer that's working on that, and they would say, okay, in the case of an album like Pink Floyd, which has been listened to billions of times over the last 50 years.
You're talking about Dark Side of the Moon, by the way. And when I think of Dark Side of the Moon, without even listening to it, I get goosebumps already. Just thinking of like all the clocks going off all around the room, or Us and Them, and Money with the cash register. Like what an unbelievably great record.
It's a great record, and how you take that record and do something even more immersive without changing it too much to where people are now saying, well, this sounds different. And that's where the artistry
terrifying.
It is. And that's where the creatives' artistry and their skills come in. Like We purely are building the tools based on their feedback, but then they're the ones who have to say, okay, I'm going to take David Gilmour's guitar and I'm going to move it to the right, because if I listen to the original stereo, that's what they wanted, but now I'm going to do it a little bit more. I'm just going to, move. And so subtlety when it comes to things like catalog music is often applied. What's exciting for new music is when it's never been heard before. So I'm an artist that's creating a brand new album, and I'm loving what Atmos can do. Let's do the whole new album in Atmos and get really extreme with where I place things, how it sits, how I can use it. That's where it really gets exciting.
Hannah, can I just a quick comment as almost a public service announcement to our listeners before you ask your next question, and unrelated, anyone who likes or anyone who loves Dark Side of the Moon should check out, if you haven't already, an album by a band called the Easy Star All Stars, Dub Side of the Moon, which is like
Tim,
a
you know this?
reggae.
You're
It's like a
shaking your head,
reggae
yes.
version of Dark Side, and it is also amazing.
Yeah, it's a wonderful
Homage.
It's like a reimagination of it.
Yeah.
In a way. Yeah, it's cool. I'm familiar.
I was going to say, to finish your sentence, if you love Dark Side of the Moon, the completion of that sentence is, you are a man. Because I am not the target audience for...
That can't
I'm neither
be
the
true.
age. I'm neither the age nor
I
the
hung
gender.
out with a lot of women listening to that record back in my college years. So.
Okay, well, maybe it's a generational thing. But I mean, have you ever had an artist or a band that were very hesitant and reticent to go back in and start changing things on their masterpiece? I mean, that seems very fraught emotionally and technically. How do you talk to them about that? Yeah.
So there's those two buckets I think are important, the emotional side and the technical side. So yes, there are artists that are like, look, I don't want to open that Pandora's box again. That was a difficult time for me when I was writing that record, recording that record. For me to go and now dig up into that, that's hard. The technical side of it is relatively easy as long as the creative team and engineering team has access to the multi-track, so the original multi-tracks. In some cases, they might not exist. In other cases, they have to go and find them. They're in some locked up cave somewhere. They need to restore them. So some can be more technically difficult than others. What we have found for a lot of, again, what we call catalog, which is really music that's 2-3 years plus older. But when you think of like music from the 70s, 80s, 90s, where artists are going back in and reimagining the music in Dolby Atmos, it's oftentimes done with the trusted artist's engineer. So like the mix engineer that the artist has spent time with, for decades. They trust them. They know that they're going to be able to take what Atmos can do to their original vision and then do something new with it. So it's not a one answer to all of it, but you're right, Hannah. It's emotional, there's technical, there's operational, there's if the artist isn't around anymore, who's going to be approving all those mixes? Yeah, like, is it one person? Is it, Miles Davis, Prince, all these artists have got like multiple people who need to approve those reimagination, and that sometimes can take time.
Tim, before we get into car talk, can you tell us just about your journey? I know that you're a very accomplished musician in your own right. And I also think, are you a voting member of the Grammys?
Yes. Yeah.
So that is
cool.
that's fascinating to me as well. Can you just tell us a little bit more about your journey and how you ended up at Dolby, where you are now, basically the boss?
I was 8 years old and I took karate lessons and I had a guitar, and I had to make a quick decision on which one I wanted to go and spend more time on. I could either do more karate or I could take more guitar lessons, and I was not very good at karate. So I quickly got the bug for music and started taking more lessons on guitar. And so like a lot of kids, it grabbed me. I got the bug. I loved it. I was decent at it, but what I really loved about music was the ability to play with other players and learn what it was like to be on, in a team, in this case, a band. So by the time I was 13, I was already playing playing music with other musicians. And I learned quickly, I'm not a very good guitar player. I'm not going to be the next Eddie Van Halen, but the people that I'm surrounding myself with were really good drummers, really good guitar players. And so they made me better. And that set me on a path to where, okay, if I surround myself with people who are better at what they do than I am, I can be successful, which sounds like something out of like a business book or something, but like it was true. And then the next kind of big thing that happened to me was my very first job. My very first job when I was 14, 15 years old was working at a music store in the Chicagoland area.
Where was this? Chicago, okay.
Yeah, Chicago, yeah, just right outside the city. And it was a mom and pop store. They had a couple of locations. They had teachers, sheet music, which for younger people listening, sheet music was a piece of paper that had notes on it that you would put in front of you and then read.
Analog.
Yes, very analog. We had lots of that in guitars and amps. And so very early on, I learned if you're going to spend time doing something, do it in an environment that you love. Like I was taking out the trash, cleaning toilets, mopping the floors, literally, but at least I was around other musicians. And I very quickly learned about the industry, instrument industry, teachers. I went to school and got an undergrad in both business and music. And
where'd you go to school?
Started working Illinois State University. And it was a great experience. It was a great experience of just kind of that marriage between like music, creative, and then also business acumen. And that was really the merger of the two things that I always really enjoyed, which is I love business strategy, but I also loved music and creative, and I love being around creatives and musicians. And so fortunately, throughout my entire life, I've been able to write and record and perform music at I wouldn't say professional level where I was like out touring all over the place, but like I did enough of it to where I still love it. I didn't get burnt on it, like a chef might get burnt where they like cook all day and the last thing they want to do is cook at home. I was able to always have music part of my career. I was fortunate to work at a company called Monster Cable.
Oh yeah.
I was there from the inception of Beats by Dre and got to experience that whole how that was born, what happened there, what we did when we brought that to market. And I've had lots of really great successes along the way when working with companies like Jawbone and the Jambox, and now at Dolby, where I've been brought on to head up the business and business strategy as it pertains to how we bring Dolby Atmos music to musicians, to streaming services, to partners, automotive partners, TV partners, et cetera. So I've had it sounds like
an awesome path, dude.
It has been. I mean, I'll admit it hasn't been easy, but the thing that has always been true is my love of music, my love of creativity, my love of being around creative people, but also understanding the business side of things and the strategy that goes behind it is so, to me, fascinating and also a creative path. And so where I am today is really an ideal situation where I get to be in an environment around people that are better at doing the things they do than I am, who push me in a business place, but also still have the ability to be creative. I still write music. I still work on music. I just released an album of my own in Dolby Atmos. That
amazing.
Like, again,
what's it called?
I'm not here to promote it, so I'm not.
Promote it.
What's it called?
I use that as a vehicle for my creative outlet. But then I also like believe in what we do, and so I use our own tools for my own creativity. I've yet to hear it in a car yet because it just released, so I got to hear it in a car soon. But yeah, so that's been my journey, and it's been a great journey.
Hannah, do you know why Tim's 8-year-old decision reminds me a lot of Ralph Macchio?
No, please educate me.
Well, I imagine you've seen The Karate Kid, wax
Yes.
on, wax off.
Yes.
And then Ralph Macchio was in, I think, a much better movie a couple years later called Crossroads.
Oh, that was one of those, that and Back to the Future as a kid, when you watch that, I mean, those were like guitar, amazing, just incredible adventures. And yeah, the Crossroads movie, for people who don't know it, it's basically the story of, it's a retelling of how a famous blues artist had gone down to the crossroads and made a deal with the devil to become this amazing artist. And Ralph Macchio plays this like kind of young kid kind of on the same path, and he has to compete with the devil, who's played by Steve Vai, who's an incredible guitar player. And
Robert Johnson, right? I think the
idea
idea
it's supposed
is
to be Robert Johnson. that is his mentor in it,
but
of sorts.
So many great musicians have made deals with the devil. It could have been Zeppelin as well, or
Oh yeah.
Dude, that is such a cool story. And let's get to cars now. I mean, everyone has had experiences with music in cars, right?
But car companies haven't realized that until.
Well, I just wonder, can you tell us, Tim, about the history of audio in cars? Because when I was a kid, I didn't notice that my car stereo kind of sucked,
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I was older that I realized you've got to dump thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars into a car to make sonically sound. How does that worked out?
Over the last few decades, I think there's been a lot of improvements to what kind of comes standard in cars versus, say, in the 60s and 70s and 80s, where they wouldn't put a lot of investment, time, or effort into the car system. You had 8 tracks. Those didn't sound all that great. And there was a huge industry that was born out of it. I mean, I mentioned that I worked for Monster Cable. A huge part of Monster's history, especially in the 90s, was in car audio products and accessories, because there was such a huge market for third-party folks going in and souping up their system. Even if it's some inexpensive car, they almost put just as much money into the system itself. But then over time...
Yeah, there used to be a store at every mall, right? You'd go and put a pile driver in your Nissan Sentra so you could have as much bass as possible, a kicker.
Yeah, those retailers back in if you think of like retail, consumer electronics retail back in like Circuit City, Best Buy days, all those... they had huge sections of the stores that were dedicated to car audio, right? I mean, that was where guys would come in and get their bazooka subs and
bazookas.
Huge,
or women,
right?
Or women might want to put a bazooka sub in her car.
I mean,
I'd like to meet that one.
Yeah. So I think what's happened now is that in the last few decades, I think auto partners auto manufacturers are looking at like, hey, we can improve the sound quality. We could add more speakers. And part of that is because the source material was getting better. I mean, when CDs were introduced, you now had a more consistent, I'll say higher quality audio experience that was available to consumer that they could take with them versus, say, a terrestrial or a cassette, where those weren't always consistent in the playback experience. CD introduction really gave way to where people were like, hey, I can have a pretty killer audio experience in my car because the source material is already starting at a pretty good place, which is a good, high quality, fairly high resolution, shiny disc. And so with that, let's build systems around that. Nowadays, with most people streaming to their cars or using some type of connection to their phone device, they're also finding like, the audio is fairly decent, and I want an improved system, the sound in my automobile. What can we do there? And so we've noticed that in the last few years, and as Atmos was starting to gain a lot of momentum, the big question we got from all the artists was, hey, when is this coming to the cars? Because I use my car to check my mixes. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, when an artist is doing a mix in a studio, 9.9 times out of 10, they will want to rip a CD, a cassette, a USB stick, whatever decade you're in, and bring it into their car and listen to it, because their car is the most trusted environment to them. That's the system they listen to the most. So even if the artist's car is just some middle of the road basic sound system, they will still bring their mix into that, listen to it as a reference, and say, oh, wow, the vocals are definitely too quiet, because I know what vocals sound like in my car, and they're typically louder. So go back into my $1 million studio or multi-$100,000 studio, but then still come into my $40,000 car and make my mixing decisions. It's just another reference point. But that's starting to, that has always been a part of a workflow for a creative. And now they want to see Atmos as a part of those workflows in these cars.
I have to imagine too that some of the hesitancy, I mean, until recent years with automakers, has been the weight issue. I mean, when you're adding in sound deadening and you're adding in speakers and whatever else, you just that's like the opposite of what you want to do for most cars.
And cost, right?
Yeah, but obviously now we're really at an advanced stage where those aren't as much of a factor.
By the way, Tim, what was the when I was a kid, my first car was a 1984 baby blue Volvo station wagon, and I had two cassettes. I had a record by Lard, which was like Jello Biafra and Ministry, and I had a King Missile record with the detachable penis single. And those are the only tapes I had for like a year and a half or something.
That explains a lot.
Do you have a memorable, Tim, like car soundtrack from your youth?
So my first car was a 1988 Ford Bronco 2.
Nice.
Absolutely loved the car. And same thing. It came with a stock stereo system, cassette deck, and I was one of many who then ran out to the local store and bought an Alpine removable face system and a 6-disc CD changer that was mounted to the back and all that. I think it was the music that I'd be sharing with friends in the car were the ones I had the most memories with. Where suddenly you'd be listening to a song together with a buddy, like let's say it's my friends and I were really into a lot of progressive music, so we put on something like King Crimson or Pink Floyd, and you'd all start cruising around cranking up the music, and it was like, wow, this is awesome to be cruising around with the music cranked. Rush was probably one of the ones that we did the most of, where it's just like, okay, throw on Tom Sawyer, whose system can handle that first big bass hit. And we literally, like, my buddy had a big old station wagon, the drummer, because he needed a station wagon. Another friend of mine had a Jeep, which was a POS, but because it was just the basic, and the sound system was terrible because it was a canvas top Jeep, and it just sounded terrible. And another friend of mine had like a 4Runner, and we would all like, what sounds best in here? And yeah, it was great.
Did you smoke cigarettes in the car back then?
Of course.
Yeah. People used to smoke in cars. Now when I'm in
traffic. And this is in the Midwest where it'd be freezing and you'd have your window cracked.
If I see somebody smoking in a car, I just can't imagine how bad their car smells. But back then, it was like a normal... Hannah, what about you?
Yeah.
Did you have a car music memory?
No, I mean, I had an old Skylark, like a 71 Buick Skylark that I shared with my sister that we bought for $200 from a little old lady who went to our church, literally, who drove it to church on Sundays. And it was a great car, but I don't even remember... I honestly don't even remember if the radio worked. It must have, but I don't have any recollection of that car because I was so embarrassed of it. I sold my half of it to my sister as quick as I could.
No. What a cool car.
And I made her drive me around. It's very cool now. It was this olive green color. It was super cool. But yeah, I mean, the radio was like an insert, it was forgettable.
Oh, I'm looking at Buick Skylarks, like 69,
they're cool.
70.
Yeah,
so cool.
They're very cool.
Yeah.
It was in great condition too. So.
All right, so how about, Tim, my question is, how good can automotive audio be? Because I hear from a lot of people that it's just not the right environment for a high fidelity sound experience.
Interesting.
I don't know if that's true or not. That's just what I kind of hear. But I do know that even expensive luxury cars, even those that have like, Macintosh branded stereo systems or like, top of the line stuff, it just doesn't sound that good. Like it just can't handle the bass, or I'm not getting the mid-range that I want, or I don't know why. It just isn't as good as it is in like the sound studio down on Houston and Broadway,
Right. Yeah. Part of that is, a lot of people listen to a lot of different genres of music, right? So that those genres can have different mixes, different timbre, different sonic qualities. And a great stereo system is one that knows what to do with all that. A great Atmos system is really meant to be recreating what the artist intended when they created their mix in Atmos. And because the nature of Atmos is immersive, meaning there can be sounds literally placed around you, it gives more room and gives you more perceived fidelity. You can hear more nuance and more detail in the music in Atmos than you can with stereo, simply because you're no longer fighting for space. So if I'm doing a stereo mix, which I love, stereo is a wonderful thing, there are things as a mix engineer that you do to compensate for the fact that you're going to be going through two speakers or two channels, even if there's multiple speakers attached to those two channels. In Atmos, and Hannah, you heard this when we were giving you some demos. You were even saying, like, I've never heard the guitar do that before. I didn't know that the keyboard was doing this little arpeggiation thing in the background.
Yeah.
Like, it's always been there, but Atmos is allowing people to now hear more of that. So to your question, Matt, around the fidelity, we have seen a huge shift in mentality, especially with our auto OEM partners, there's now 25 of them that have totally gotten on board with this, like, wow, this experience is something that is truly unique, to where I am getting that almost hi-fi, audiophile, studio-like experience within the car, because it's a controlled environment. It's a cabin meaning within the cabin itself for sound. It's something that a lot of the audio engineers at these companies are really geeking out on, because it's like, oh, now I can finally really push the limits of what audio can sound like in a car, because yes, the materials can be expensive, but they're also getting more affordable. I know what I can do with DSP and how to place speakers around inside of a car and what to do with them to tune them to have the best experience. And so now when people hear Dolby Atmos in any of our car partners' cars, it is always, it is always oh my God, I've never heard music like this before. We hear that all the time.
Where
transcendent.
I mean, you have multiple partners, so I'm sure you want to be fairly brand agnostic, but
you can name names.
Can you name a few examples of some amazing car stereo systems you've heard? Like, have you heard one that just blows your mind?
So yes, and what's fun too is that they continue to tweak and adjust and improve on them because they can through the beauty of software. The recent launch we did with Cadillac, their entire EV line is now going to be supporting, if it doesn't already, Dolby Atmos, was really incredible. And the reason why they're one of the more recent ones that have come to market is that they spent time with the artists, with musicians in their studios, listening to what it sounds like in a studio. And they said, how do we make the studio come to the car? That was their mentality. And that mentality is really what drove that team to take the time. It was a couple of years before they brought it to market, because they wanted to get it, quote unquote, right. And right meant an artist could sit in their car and go, wow, this does sound a lot like what I experienced in the studio. So the work that Cadillac has done has been great. I've heard a majority of them, not all of them, but a majority of them, and they all sound great for different reasons depending on the placement of the seats, the speakers, etc. The Polestars are really cool because they've got speakers that are in the headrest, so that gives them more ability to adjust what they do there and how they render the audio within the car. And we work with all these partners to help them in tuning their cars.
Is an EV intrinsically better for sound than a combustion engine vehicle, just because it's quieter?
That's an interesting question. We had gotten a question once from somebody saying, so is Dolby Atmos only for EVs? Because the trend had been almost all the cars that were coming to market with Dolby Atmos were EVs. Yeah. And the answer was, it just so happened to be a coincidence because those were the newest cars coming to market for many of these partners. It wasn't that it has to be an EV, but a majority of them were, because that's where they were putting most of their R&D and promotion and marketing and et cetera. There is an advantage to an EV from, yes, the engine noise is, there's next to nothing, and they're incorporating noise into the car so that people can hear it. So the cabinets tend to be a little bit quieter when it comes to that, but then at the same time, every OEM is doing something different. An auto partner is doing something different when it comes to inside car sound isolation. Some are really deadening the sound inside, some are not as much. It just depends on what they're doing there. That's all a part of the system. When you think of the system, car partners think of the system as also incorporating the sounds of the car itself.
Or I'm driving this right now. I'm test driving this Mustang GT, which is a convertible. So obviously it's got that high fidelity downside. But I also the stereo is quite good. It's a Bang & Olufsen setup, and I've been listening to a lot of metal in there. Earthless.
Nice.
Earthless is this trio from San Diego that I recommend. It's like
got it.
Metal jam band. But what I've noticed, or what I suspect, is because it's a Mustang GT and they want you to feel like a hooligan, and kind of the exhaust is, you can change the volume of it. I think they're also playing the exhaust through the audio system, or
just to
make
give it a little more.
Yeah, to make it sound like the V8 really is kicking, and it is. I mean, it is a fun car to drive. But I keep trying to turn off the exhaust so I can just hear Earthless. And dude, all of the high-end audio systems that I've played with in cars, and even in my house, have these equalizers that are either just as simple as treble and bass, or treble, mid, and bass, or they're like, as a person who has no expertise or experience with sound engineering, I never know how to set those. Is there a proper way?
Can you come over?
Is it different for every genre? Like, can we get an AI to set it up for me? Like, what's the deal with those equalizers? Is it better if I leave it on 000? Because I feel like Pink Floyd and you guys have done all the work. Why would I want to change it? Yeah.
Right. I always think of EQ as more preference. And if you go in it with that mindset versus how do I tune this? Am I doing it right or wrong? It gets real dangerous. And the reason why a lot of AV systems, whether it's an AVR in somebody's home theater system or the audio system in a car, give consumers limited access to that. You have to actually go deep into a menu usually. And same with TV, like you have to go deep into the menu if you really want to adjust the picture, is that you could really screw it up very quickly, especially if you don't know what you're doing. And so I always think about things like EQ in a car, like bass, mid, treble, as a preference. And usually it's a set it and forget it. You kind of get it. It's like, okay, I mostly listen to this genre of music. It's a little bass heavy, so I'll turn the bass down just a little bit, or I listen to one genre and it's maybe needs a little more bass. I find that happy medium, and then I set it and forget it. What we've done with Dolby Atmos, and when we work with our partners, is they are trying to find ways to make the system work the best it can for any genre, and their goal is really to represent what the creative was doing in the studio. And so, like Hannah, when we were sitting in the car, we listened to Shaka Khan, right?
Yep, of course.
And then we listened to some Marvin Gaye.
Yes.
Some
Also
Elton
Prince.
John, Prince. We listened to some more, some newer music in there. We were kind of going across, and at no point did you ever, at least you didn't say anything to me about, turn the volume up, turn it down, turn the bass up. Like,
no.
That kind of goes away. And so I think, Matt, for you, it's just like, if you're somebody who likes a little bit more bass, then just turn the bass up and know that everything you're going to play has got a little, or somebody who's like, I want a little bit more high end because my ears are getting older and it's rolled off a little bit. Like,
yes, it's
problem. Just preference.
What is speaking of like equalizing things, is AI becoming a factor in the work that you do? And what is the future of sound for Dolby in the next 5-10 years?
So AI is really exciting when it comes to how it can really improve and enhance creativity. In general, for Dolby, we always start with the creative, because they are the ones who are the human creative. And all the products, even at the top of the hour when I talked about how Ray started with sitting side by side with a mix engineer, trying to understand what is the problem they're having, and them saying, there's all this noise getting introduced. That 60 years later, it's still true, to where we sit side by side with the creatives and try to understand, okay, what is getting in your way of being more creative? Is it workflows that could become more efficient? Is it setting up your system faster? And those are the things we learn from, right? And so We definitely, AI is not news to us. We've used it in a lot of our research and technology as we build products for creatives and build products for consumers. And I
It's not a
think for
scary thing, is what I
no,
hear you. It's a tool.
no,
It's a tool.
it is yeah, we think of it as a tool, and AI is something that should be and is being embraced by lots of people for ways to become more efficient, more effective. So if you think of AI as like, hey, could I use this as something that inspires me? Could I use this as something that helps get the work out of the way so that I can just work? So, for example, if I'm a mixing engineer, you know, really good mixing engineers are ones who have already kind of got their system up and running and they know how to just get started. Thinking about it, if you're a chef, if you're a chef, you know where all your knives are, you know where all your utensils are, you know where you're like how you're going to work, where you're going to move throughout your kitchen. But if you throw that chef into a new kitchen, okay, now they have to readjust themselves. So now they, think of a mixing engineer as, okay, I've got my kitchen, I know everything I need to do, but if I get thrown into a new situation, could AI help make my workflow faster so that I can get comfortable right away so that I can be started working? That's that's one very simple example of that. And so we look at things like that, like where does AI help a creative become more creative? And because we have such a deep history and really relationship with so many creatives in all industries, that's what we hear from them too. Like we're still going to be turning knobs, making decisions, making creative decisions, because it's the creatives who are finding that, tapping into that emotional point within their artwork, whether it is a movie or a sound design for a movie or sound design for a game or a mix for a song. That's the human element. AI should just help it's just like any good technology for a creative, the technology should get out of the way, right? It shouldn't be the thing holding them up. And technology has been, from the very beginning of recorded music, photography to phono records, like that's all technology that helped push creatives along of like, oh, I can now do something that I couldn't do before. But if the technology gets too clunky or it's too slow, why would you can all relate this to anything in your life. Like, oh, if it's too clunky or too slow, why am I going to use it?
Right.
Dude, you remember when Siamese Dream came out?
Yeah.
What an insane record.
I don't even know what that is. I've literally never.
The Smashing Pumpkins' second record, and you're from Chicago, so.
Yeah, my cousin went to school with Billy, and he was telling me about them before they hit. And it was funny, I had a quick story on the Pumpkins. The music store we were at, we ended up doing work with them on the Melancholy record, doing a lot of guitar tech and stuff, guitar teching for them and like working on their guitars. And so I had a chance to meet them and go to the quote unquote pumpkin patch and all that back in the early 90s and meet those folks. They're really interesting.
What was the
people,
vibe?
Super creative, gear everywhere, super rock and roll, as in like, everybody had it. This was 93, 94. So they had hit big. We're working on the Melancholy, the double record. And you walk into this place and it was just like guitars everywhere, amps everywhere, 2 mixing rooms. Billy had like a couple different vocal booths, but it was beautiful because it was a creative den. It was them working on what some consider their masterpiece record, of just total like everything and anything, technology, analog.
I've never understood that Melancholy as a master. Like to me, when Gish first came out, that was an awakening year. Like Gish to me came out almost the same time as Pearl Jam, 10, and 9 Inch Nails.
Almost got lumped into grunge, but it wasn't quite.
But and then with Siamese Dream, the reason I'm thinking about it, not only because you're from Chicago, but because he was overdubbing so much.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That it was like it's an element of it's an instrument on the record, and
big wall of sound. Yep.
And I just think like that's one of the greatest American rock and roll records of all time. It's just unbelievable.
He's got a podcast now. I don't know if you've checked it out.
Oh, really?
He interviews lots of his friends, and they're all these different types of artists. So it's him interviewing Zakk Wylde to Corey Feldman to
Bill Burr. I think he has Bill Burr on there.
Bill Burr, like it's pretty interesting.
Cool.
He's quite the intellectual. His interviews are his interviews are interesting.
He's
but
a
they're
unique
entertaining
person for sure.
Very much. Yeah.
Tim, it's been so much fun talking to you. I hope we can actually have you on again. If you're ever in New York, come by my studio.
And Matt, we got to get you listening to this stuff in Atmos more. I mean, I would love for you to hear. I assume you're big into like metal, rock is kind of your vibe.
Yeah, I mean, I like a lot of music, but I listen to a lot of Dead, a lot of obviously that early '90s kind of grunge stuff, a lot of progressive rock. I love Tool so much.
Yeah, well, Matt, you worked at a record store too.
Yeah, for years and years.
Couple records you should check out that just came out that are in Atmos, where we have creatives. Because metal and rock have always been a little bit more difficult when it comes to immersive, because so much of the sound is based on a crushing stereo field. But they're getting, engineers are getting more and more educated on how to really create that big wall of sound. Judas Priest's last record is in Dolby Atmos, and it is a monster of a record, as in just both the songs, but the songs and the sound. That in Atmos is pretty awesome. The number one rock record right now is by a band called Ghost. They're actually one of the first bands to hit Billboard Top 100, period, in the last 5 years. I mean, it's been mostly solo acts. Their new record is in Dolby Atmos. They're kind of like a, I'd say metal meets 80s rock with a little bit of Queen thrown in there.
They're from Sweden, is all you have to say, I think.
Yeah, I would check them out. I think that's a good one for you. And again, in Atmos, those are good ones. And then Devin Townsend, if you haven't gotten into him yet, check out Devin Townsend. He's kind of like the modern day, I'd say almost modern day Bowie, as far as just every record sounds different. It's extremely emotional. He loves Atmos. His songs are all over the place, from real heavy to real folky. He does it all. But man, I think you'd dig those. And again, they happen to all be in Atmos, but yeah,
he's
they're
bald also, so respect.
He's bald. He's crazy.
Part of the brotherhood.
Man, he's a hell of a musician.
Me, Devin, and Billy,
Well, and Rob Halford from Priest. There you go.
There you go.
Thank you so much.
Mount Rushmore.
Yeah. Guys, it's been fun. Thanks again for the time.
You know what I love about Tim is I kind of empathize with him, because he makes the point that he wasn't the best guitar player or the best singer or musician or whatever, but he wanted to be around creative people. And that is really how I feel. I don't consider myself an artist, but I love being around artists and around creative people. And I love trying to facilitate them as much as I can. And it seems like that's kind of what he loves too. So it was really cool.
It's funny because I actually think of you as one of the best journalists that I know.
Oh.
I mean, you...
Well, did I just set you up for that great compliment?
No, I just think, when someone talks about journalistic integrity, I think of you. So,
that's very kind.
We have obviously many really talented journalists here.
Yes.
And also you can be a talented journalist in a number of different ways, right?
Yes.
But I think you are being quite modest in the way that Tim was obviously being very modest as well. I'm sure when I find out what his record is, I'm going to listen to it, and I'm sure it's amazing.
Yeah, he has, I think, according to Google, like 15 albums out. So he's really accomplished. Can't find the current album, but yeah.
I have to say, I think that's one of the most important conversations we've had on this podcast, and we've been doing this for over a year.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you think that. Yeah, it's informative.
I would put him up there.
We need to stay in touch. We need to stay in touch with these guys.
What have you got going on? I know you had a number of luxury cars. I just want to quickly ask what is on your docket?
Well, this week I'm driving the Maybach GLS Night Series Edition, which is the one that's two-tone with wheels that look like discs with the Maybach logo repeated all over them in black plastic. Yeah. And the inside is white with lots of pillows, lots of suede pillows thrown around and pinstriping.
It's funny. You'll be driving basically the rich person, the sort of loud rich person version of my family car, because we have a GLS.
You're right. And we need to discuss it at length when I finish this. I've had the car for half a week. Yeah. I'm
going to actually get on Thursday, at least I think I am, going to get, the press guy is like calling me right now. 911 GTS, the hybrid car that you drove in Spain.
Yes. Oh, good. Okay, I can't wait to compare notes.
I'm very excited. It's obviously not a stick, which I keep getting these cars that are like vehicles you should only buy with a manual transmission. I keep getting the non-stick version of these. It happened with the BMW M2. It happened with the Ford Mustang GT. And those two actually come with a manual transmission. This GTS is the first generation that doesn't. But I'm being assured that I will not miss it. What do you think?
This could be some sort of universe evolution, like consciousness raising for you, Matt. And yes, I've been in LA too long, but this could be the universe telling you your consciousness is being elevated into a post-manual environment.
Most importantly, you and I are going to fly off in separate planes to Paris next week.
Yes.
And then we'll get on likely separate trains and meet in Le Mans, where they do the 24-hour race. I can't wait either. This came together so well, don't you think?
I can't believe it. This meeting that we just had before recording this podcast got me really excited because we have very good guests. There are a lot of people working on it. I also just got off a call with Porsche right before we spoke, Matt, that I have to update you on some nice things from our friends at Porsche.
That reminds me that I need to put Steiner. I need to get the time slotted in for Steiner because
we've got some things to do. It's going to be awesome. I can't wait.
I'm very much looking forward to it. I've never been to any kind of 24-hour race before, so this will be my first time.
I've never been to Le Mans. I'm really my first time at Le Mans, the race. So yeah. Can't wait.
All right. We'll do a special edition of our podcast from there.
Yeah.
And we're going to have so many amazing guests that I don't know how we'll choose. But we're going to be tired also, I think, after
It's going to be grueling.
Yeah.
For anybody listening, this is not a glamour race. I mean, I'm sure our listeners already know that. But, I have been to the 24 hours at Daytona, and it is grueling. This is not some fluff piece, Indy 500.
I'm also getting the
F1
sense,
race.
and I'd love to hear what listeners think about this. And you can email us, by the way, at hotpursuit@bloomberg.net. I'm getting the sense that, there was a time, obviously, when the 24-hour race at Le Mans was the proving ground for your car.
Sure.
I'm getting the sense that it is, once again, an incredibly important venue. It's like the Davos of car makers because all of the CEOs of the biggest,
completely.
So
completely.
Yeah.
Switching gears, no pun intended, real quick. You know what documentary I started last night?
What?
Dale Earnhardt on Amazon.
Wow.
Have you seen it?
No.
It's kind of great. The mustaches alone make it worth it. It's on Amazon Prime. It's a 4-part documentary series. I've seen the first episode. It's kind of great. The accents, the mustaches, the racing suits.
Good plug.
I'm into it.
I'm
really
definitely
going
to watch that when I get home.
It's really good. It's great.
All right, very cool. Mustache goals, Dale Earnhardt. He's right up there with Tom Selleck in terms of that. All right, well, that's all we have time for this week. We'll see you back here in a different time, in a different place next week. Well, same time.
Speaking French, maybe.
Yes. I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Hannah Elliott, and this is Bloomberg.